Good. Morning, everyone.
Morning.
It's my honor to introduce to you Chet Rose. He will be helping us negotiate the pathways in dealing with those times when we become less able to take care of ourselves or we have to take care of those that we care about. So he's going to help us work our way through being ready as crises emerge. Thanks, Chet.
Thank you, John. Yes, GRACE stands for Being Ready as Crises Emerge. I'd like to present a hypothetical situation. What if someday or some evening you go to a party and you're having fun and you wake up and realize you're in a hospital or you're at home, but you can't move and you can't talk. And you're listening and you hear your children around you. They're discussing, what should we do with mom or dad? And Pete, the oldest, workaholic lawyer son, who is say, I'm the eldest and I should be in charge. And Susan, the next child, says, well, why? Yeah. And then they're arguing about who should be in charge of caring for you and who is going to take care of your needs. And your mind is saying, wait a minute. They're not listening to me. I'm talking, but they're not listening. I don't want Pete to be in charge. He's a workaholic. He's always at work and never paying attention to his family. Susan, on the other hand, is a stay-at-home mom, and she's very conscientious about getting things done and taking care of things that are needed. You are apparently in a situation where you cannot communicate your desires or your preferences. This could work in one way if you're the one being cared for or needed, or are you suddenly contacted and told your aunt, your uncle, your son is in a coma or is in a non-communicative situation. One of the people we talked to a long time ago from San Antonio said that his son lived in New Orleans. He got a call saying that his son was in an accident, he's in a coma. He rushed to New Orleans and found out the doctors wouldn't talk to him because his son's an adult. He had to go to court and be declared guardian for his son. What a pain in the...
Yes.
Because being a guardian, you have to get the court's permission to do anything. And before you can do something, you have to go to them and say, this is a situation, I need to make a decision or do something. And then you have to report back to the court periodically about what all you're doing and get their agreement. This situation is what happened to me in early 1990. My in-laws were living in Mesa, Arizona. Father had been having health problems, and mother had taken him to an appointment, dropped him off at the first front door of the hospital, and she drove into the parking lot. A while later, some people found her lying beside her car. She had had apparently a seizure, They rushed her into the hospital, did all sorts of exams on her, and determined she had a brain tumor. She was in a coma. Father panicked. He didn't know what happened to her because he was waiting at the front door for her to walk in, but she never walked in. Finally, someone found him and relayed him to the emergency room. He called his oldest daughter, my sister-in-law, in Michigan. And then, even though he hadn't driven in years, he drove home from the hospital to their apartment. And what's going on? He was dumbfounded. He didn't know what to do. My sister-in-law flew down to Mesa, and Father remembered enough to say, get Chet. He's supposed to take care of things. She called me and said, well, why aren't you here taking care of things? I said, I don't know anything about that. It turns out that they had prepared powers of attorney for me, the son-in-law, not my sister-in-law, the eldest, not my wife, the middle child, or not my brother-in-law, the youngest. And I had to make arrangements, talking with the people at the hospital in Mesa, to move them from Mesa, Arizona to San Antonio. Since I was going to be in charge, I wanted them where I could manage it. I got them enrolled in a personal care facility just 2 blocks from my office. It was very frustrating because I had no idea what I could do, what I should do, and so on. I had to go fly out to Mesa, go through all their paperwork, found the documents that I needed, and bundled up various things, brought them back to San Antonio. I couldn't find anyone that could tell me what I had the authority to do, what I couldn't do, or whatever. This situation with the in-laws lasted for 3 years before they died. After their death, my wife said, you know, we had such frustration. We ought to write a book about this situation. And so we did. She prepared this little pamphlet with the information I'm going to present you today about the types of information, the documents, and so on that you need if you become responsible for somebody else, or the types of documents and information you should have ready in case someone needs to take care of you. These documents and information, as we see on the screen, and it's on the handout you have, it various things, the medical information, the financial information. I didn't know what types of medicines my in-laws were on, what their medical conditions were. I didn't know what their finances was. And so these are the types of things you should do something about. And these documents, you can prepare them about yourself. Put them in a notebook, label it, put it on the shelf, and you tell whoever you decide you want to be responsible that you have prepared powers of attorney giving them the authority. You tell them, look, if something happens to me, that notebook on that shelf has all the information, the documents, authority, and so on. I'm not giving them to you now, but if something happens to me, that's where you go. That's where your information is. And you can, at that point in time, you can tell your children, and look, I know Pete is the eldest, but I want Susan to be in charge. And get over, don't argue about it. This is my decision. This is the one that I want. And Susan should know that you're appointing her and be ready and know where that information is. Now, as we approach some of this stuff, what Sue forgot to do was tell me how to make this move. Okay. I want the page to move up. Okay. That it? Yeah. And then move to the next page. Good? Good. Thank you. And like I said, the first item I have, the way I've arranged it, you can arrange the same way you want it in the notebook. But usually, when it's something serious like this, it's a medical situation. And hopefully, even though you may be, in a medical situation, you're able to communicate, but just you're not capable of making, or you shouldn't be making decisions on your own. The medical information on the type of illnesses and conditions, what's your physician's name and contact number, a specialist, cardiologist, etc. What's your hospital's medications. Some of you also received that little slip of paper. I found that putting all that information on a small piece of paper like that, carrying in your purse or billfold. I created that with my father-in-law and my mother-in-law, one for each other. When you go to a doctor's appointment, they want to know what medication you're on, what prior illness and so on. Just give them that little slip of paper. Let them copy it. Let them use all that information. I carry one of those for myself. I gave my wife one. It's very handy, concise, but it's the type of information the doctors and nurses want. Now that's the medical information that should be compiled and available. Financial, if you're suddenly responsible or someone is responsible to you for your care, they need to know what situation you have. Any bank accounts, brokerage accounts, retirement plans, what insurance policies, over to the next side of the page, the location of location of your last year's tax returns, which provides a lot of information on your income, your Social Security, pensions, interest, royalties, dividends, rents, installment sales, any type of information dealing with your finances. Another item is current recurring expenses. Is there rent you have to pay? Utilities have to be paid? Condo fees, cable, insurance? See the list there. What legal representative do you have? Who prepared the powers of attorney? And who's familiar with your situation? Speaking of powers of attorney, I'm not a lawyer. I can't give you legal advice, but as a tax preparer, I can tell you, if your power of attorney does not specify that the person you're appointing can deal with taxing authorities, IRS will not honor the power of attorney. It has to specify specifically authority to deal with taxing authorities. Last item on the list is personal, no, back up just a second. Within the legal, the directive to physician. This is not financial power of attorney, but it's a directive to physicians about do not keep me alive by artificial means, do not give me a feeding tube, do not incubate me with a breathing tube. You have to be very specific about what you do or do not want done in that directive to physicians. One of the situations I had to deal with, mother with her brain tumor, she had, over the 3 years she was alive, she had various periods of being in a coma. She would go into a coma, they would treat her, and she would come back out. In one of these situations, she was in the hospital because the nursing home sent her there because she was in a coma. Monday morning, I went in to visit her and had a feeding tube in her. And I said, wait a minute, you have the directive to physician. She chose not to have feeding tubes. Oh, well, the doctor on call over the weekend put it on her. I said, I don't care. He was not supposed to. I had to go to the head of the hospital and threaten a lawsuit. Well, their rationale was she had had so many IVs that her veins were collapsing, so they put a feeding tube in to give her medication. And since the tube was already in, they could not remove it. I said, well, it was your mistake. She already decided not to have a feeding tube. The compromise that we worked out is that they would only use that tube for medication, not for hydration or feeding. They told me that she would only live about a week. 9 weeks later, she died. After that incident with that weekend, the hospital sent her back to the nursing home. Said, there's nothing we can do for her. You can keep her back there. I suspect that some of those nurses that raised real heck with me for, raising the cane about the feeding tube, I suspect that someone was slipping her food during the night. That she lasted 9 weeks. Okay, that's directed to physicians. And depending on the level of incapacity and the period of time of care, you may want to know names, address, and phone numbers of family and close friends to contact them to explain to them about the situation with the individual. Back here, when you're dealing with the medical care, you need to find out from the doctors what's the prognosis, what is the specific problem, what do they plan to do about it, and course of treatment, where, how extensive, transportation, and so on. Believe me, dealing with somebody else's medical bills is frustrating. With the hospital, you have the basic hospital costs, the doctor's costs, the hospital supply costs. There seems to be 4, 5, 6 different billings for every visit to a hospital. And dealing with that situation and with Medicare and insurance coverage, frustration of the wazoo. Another situation that you need to consider, what kind of living arrangement are you going to be? Like I said, I had to move my in-laws from Mesa, Arizona to San Antonio. We were able to get them into an assisted living facility because they were needed care by nurses in giving their medication and helping them with their care. You may decide, if you're the person being cared for, you may decide that you want to stay at home. You don't want to be in a facility. Then that means someone's got to have to come in and live with you if you're staying at home. Who, how, so what's the arrangements there? Another possibility, which you have to decide, is moving with the caregiver. Those are things you should think about and consider when you're making these arrangements ahead of time. Like I said, after 3 years of dealing with this, my wife wrote that book that we said, now, how do we get people to read that and to look at these things? We formed a nonprofit, small nonprofit. We started giving seminars. We gave spoke to church groups, employees groups, credit unions, banks, various. We must have given 100 or so seminars like this, trying to get people aware of the situation. And some of the people say, don't worry, I already have a will. I have taken care of it. No, a will only applies after you're dead. If you're still alive but need someone to care for you, or you need to care for someone who is alive, these documents, this information that I'm talking about, is what is important for the caregiver. It's important for you as the person being cared for, that you have expressed your opinion, your preferences, what you would like done if that situation came about. Yes, Charlie.
Chet, in my case, I had medical power of attorney for my mother, which is where I ran into these same kind of issues. Who determines when that is activated? Because in a situation when they're just incapable of making these decisions themselves, when does the caregiver's rights take over, and who determines that?
I would say, again, I'm not an attorney, but I would say you as a caregiver should go with your mother to a doctor or regular doctor's appointments. You talk to the doctor and you say, look, I'm questioning whether mom is capable, whether she's sharp enough right now to make these decisions that's going to affect her life. And rely on the doctor to say, I agree, and yes, you need to be making the decisions.
Okay.
That's what we found out in talking with doctors and attorneys. Yes, ma'am.
May I add on to that?
Yes.
I had the care of both my parents. They both developed Alzheimer's. And trust your knowledge of your mother. And because the doctor sees your mother for 15 minutes. I was writing their family doctor letters about their behaviors and what I was seeing, and because I was trying to stop their driving, which is a huge deal.
Oh, yes.
And the doctor wouldn't take away their driving, even though they weren't safe. So, and I'm a registered nurse, so trust your instincts about your loved one, and advocate for.
Yeah, in my case, I just took the keys. Steal the keys.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Well, there you go.
And-
Whatever you have to do. There you
And
go.
one thing I've learned over the years, talking to people, find a local, some state policeman that you can talk to. And you say, here's the situation. Would you visit my mother and say, we've had some rumors about your medical condition. We would like to evaluate you for driving.
Okay.
And my wife's grandfather, we pulled that on him, and the local state policeman came out and visited us. And he was aware of the situation, and he said, well, you don't meet the qualifications anymore. We're gonna have to pull your driver's license, and please have your keys given to the family members. That's one way to get around the driving situation. And we found over the years, talking to policemen, that they're cooperative about that. They don't want someone out there wandering around causing problems because of the mental condition. ma'am.
I found with this directive to physicians, if you have an emergency situation, and I immediately took this directive in for my father, and they never entered it in the computer, and they tried to resuscitate my father. So not just hand it over, but make sure that they actually put it in the computer, because 3 days later, those physicians did not see it. So there's another one that you would think it was taken care of, but you almost have to be the advocate to make sure.
Glad you brought that up. Because my first wife, her directive physician said, do not resuscitate. She had a medical condition, and they said, we need to resuscitate you for treatment. And she said, no, I don't want that. They explained that we're not keeping you alive by this. We're just temporarily resuscitating you for treatment purposes, and you will recuperate and be okay if we can do this. So you have to talk with your doctor about specific statements that do not resuscitate to keep me alive. Do not use it feeding to keep me alive. Only use those as treatment procedures. Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to add on to that. Both my parents had the whole, I forget, what's it, advanced directives.
Right.
They had the whole advanced directives, pages of it, and they were in nursing homes. And when they were near death, they came with me, like this pink form, and said, now what are your wishes? And I'm like, but we've given you my parents' wishes. I still had to mark again, near their death, what we wanted. So it's very confusing.
Yes, and when I had to run in with the hospital, my wife would say, what did we do? I said, look, we didn't do anything. She decided she did not want a feeding tube. I was, as the power of attorney, I was fulfilling her wishes. And that's what you have to specify and explain if you get into a discussion with your caregiver or with the person you're caring for. Yes, sir.
I've had some experience that actually in my employment, that a directive to physician is a directive to a physician. Oftentimes, the person who's coming to the house might be an ambulance, emergency worker. It's not the doctor. And so talk to your doctors, and the doctor can write an order to the nursing staff and to the ambulance people. Here are my doctor's orders. And you have to have it there on the refrigerator, that the ambulance driver can read, oh, I've got doctor's orders, do not resuscitate. So that's a separate document. Talk to your doctors about this dilemma, about a physician's order that I can have on my refrigerator for the nursing staff or the ambulance
Emergency.
driver or police
Nursing
officer, the nursing home
Nursing home,
staff,
yeah.
their instruction is to resuscitate, to take you to the doctor. So talk to your doctor and your nursing home staff about this other document, different than the directive to physician. It's more of a doctor's order to the staff. What do you do if you find me? To the security guards, to the, those folks whose first effort is to give you CPR. If
Yeah.
the security guy sees you on the ground,
Thank you. I
That's
never
another,
heard that before.
that's another step. Yeah, talk to your doctors about physician's orders that you would have on your possession. And that's a little trick that somehow you have that when if you live alone, you know, that they find it or notice it. But that's another step I've seen taken.
Yes, a number of these things you need to discuss with your attorney about how they should be documented, what should be included, what shouldn't be included. Like I say, I'm an accountant. I'm not an attorney. I can't give you legal advice. I imagine you've all heard that an expert is anyone that has traveled more than 50 miles. Well, since this all occurred in San Antonio, Texas, I qualify for the 50-mile. I lived down there 28 years. And this occurred 30 years ago, so things may have changed slightly, especially in what's required in the powers of attorney and directives to physicians and so on. So,
And the one other thing I learned was, as soon as the person dies, your power of attorney is done.
done.
And then you need that attorney's help to get, with the estate.
Well, the executor of your
Executor,
estate.
executor of the estate. And
Better
you,
testamentary.
you still have things to prepare, funerals and, you know, expenses.
Yeah, and then your will applies.
Yeah.
You know, you may be the caregiver, but you may not be the executor.
Yeah, yeah.
Correct.
Lord.
That's a different document, yeah.
Are there any other questions, comments?
Well, I'm sorry to say so much, but with my parents and I saw their decline, I went and talked to the local bank and got their signature to get statements of their accounts and oversee. And that was a huge, important thing to do.
Yes. You need to manage their money, especially if they're going into dementia. And
Yeah,
some days they're perfectly fine, and the next day they're la-la land.
And if you have an investment broker, there again, while your parent or whoever is alive, you know, make sure they have this power of attorney too, so that, you know, not just the bank, but, yeah.
Yes,
I'm reminded of a new piece of advice that is different than 1980, and that is power of attorney for online businesses. That's you mentioned that tax reporting people have to have their special permission. If you want to talk to Facebook about their account, if you want to talk to the bank about their online banking, if you want to talk to Instagram, their email providers, that's a separate permission, and that's more important today than a lot of those other things, is getting under control of those electronic companies
yeah.
that you need to intercede with their emails and their Facebook and so forth. So that's another specific legal document or a paragraph within the power of attorney that I have power to get their password. I have power to close the account. I have power to look at their banking online. That's another important current issue.
yes.
I tell you, we need to probably have outfits now that just help you with all of this, right? All this stuff that has increased dramatically over the years.
Like I said, back in 1990, well, 93, I contacted any number of organizations saying, as a caregiver, what authority, what can I do, what can I do? Nobody had any guidance. After we wrote this and started giving our little seminars, things started popping up. USAA Insurance Company started their own briefing like this. These are the types of things that you need to do if you become a caregiver. And that was just one example of banks and brokerage companies, other organizations started. That's why we let our nonprofit start, because everybody was into it at that point.
One other thing, I mean, that muddies waters even worse is when you're dealing with a marriage, you're dealing with two parents. Because literally, my father died and I had to prove that my parents were married, which was a Medicare thing, a Social Security thing.
Yep.
My parents were married in California. My parents had no idea where their marriage license was. It took me months to find the record of their marriage. I mean, it's that Social Security will gladly accept payments to them under the assumption that they're married, but then when they die, I had to prove that they were married in the first place. It was insane.
Yes, it was very frustrating.
Yeah.
And I remember taking my mother to the Social Security office to notify them that my father had died, and this person, this clerk or whatever they are,
Bureaucrat.
lectured me, don't I dare spend my mother's money, and she really gave me this like sermon, and I'm like, I'm just the caregiver.
Oh, my goodness.
So, you never know.
Yes. Any further questions on scaring you?
Yeah. Yes.
We covered it all,
Okay.
I think.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, very
Thank
helpful.
you. This will be a big help for us.
Yeah.
Chet, what is your last name?
Rose, like a flower.
Rose. Thank you.
Rose.
Thank you.
Yeah. These are Meals on Wheels, guy. He's the head.
And I was here talking about the Meals on Wheels program
Yep.
Right.
a year or so ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And another tie to the local area. I graduated from Milton Hershey School.
Wow.
He's
And
got his pin on.
Oh, is that what, oh, okay.
yes, and Hershey Junior College, back when that was still in existence.
Wow.
Well, that takes you back. Well, that ended in 64.
Yeah.
64 is when they closed it.
I graduated from there in '61,
61. Yeah.
and then transferred to Elizabethtown. I had applied to Penn State, and I waited,
Oh.
and I waited, and I finally said, I better apply someplace else. I applied, got accepted. I started classes at Elizabethtown, and I got this letter from Penn State saying, your student number is,
Oh. Oh.
and I contacted and I said, too little, too late.
Oh.
And
You said have a notebook with your information, your
Yes.
passwords, your accounts, your whatever. We've made one of those notebooks. It is called Having Our House in Order for our two sons, so that they have our power of attorney. But I found I have to constantly update it.
Yeah.
And you can't forget to do that because your credit card numbers change, they've been
Yeah.
scammed.
Passwords
Your
change.
passwords
Everything
change,
changes.
so it's like an ongoing thing.
Yeah.
I understand. I probably have not updated mine as much as I should
You
have.
better look.
Right.
Right.
And my problem is, my two sons, one is in Georgia and one's in Los Angeles. And my current wife has two sons, and we keep all our stuff separate.
Oh,
That's good.
oh,
Yeah.
wow.
life becomes complicated.
Yes.
Yeah, nothing's easy.
Death becomes complicated.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And they'll have the form that takes your document.
Hey, it was good to see you. How you feeling?
And the security even knows.
You kinda had us work here for a while. You gonna be able to?
Well, I'm not there yet.
Oh, you're not inside yet?
Well, I'm waiting.
Oh, okay.
I'm waiting, but they'll probably even give you the stuff now.
Well, yeah, who knows?
That's good to know.
I was confused if you were not, you were on the way
No,
back.
I'm on the waiting list. I think it might be 3 years yet.
Talk to your doctor directly.
Well, I'm taking care of my mom, so that's what I'm,
Another good resource
that's why I'm definitely gonna get one
is,
for her. Because she picked up twice by the ambulance, and she doesn't want to be there, she has congestive heart
Church of the
failure.
Redeemer United.
And she doesn't want people, running back.
And I would have.
So I need to get one of those for her. And I gotta make sure, she's at the Cross Keys Center Village. I wanna make sure that they have it. So I'm glad I came. They had POA, but I like, you said.
So it's like today, 2024.
Yeah, well, that's
Yeah,
what
I,
it is. And the separate
I know
doctor.
Physician's orders is what I
Med
meant.
Center. I also worked with the VA,
Yeah.
Oh, wow, yeah.
20 years in
I didn't even
nursing.
really
Oh,
think about that.
Yeah.
Totally.
When you said
Hey,
USAA,
thank you
my
so
son's in
much.
the Army, and that's physician.
That works like a lot.
Dang it.
Well, it's been, first I did it with my father,
Thank you.
and that's the one that got messed up at the hospital, and then he was in a coma. Because they resuscitated him, and he had to wait, you know. That was- Thought it was you, but I didn't want to interrupt you during your computer lesson there. I thought, that looks like Chet.